I'm World Cup champion Megan Klingenberg. Wondering who you should root for at the FIFA Women's World Cup? I'm hosting a new podcast, My New Favorite Futbolista, where I will introduce you to soccer's brightest stars and the causes they are championing. From the 22-year-old American phenom speaking out about student-athlete mental health,
I try to just approach everything with you don't know what someone's going through,
to the U.S. defender who travels to tournaments with her young son.
Am I ever gonna be able to run for 5 minutes straight?
Check out My New Favorite Futbolista wherever you listen to podcasts.
Editaudio.
What is the WNBA?
The Women's National Basketball Association.
How'd you know that?
That's only sister.
Oh my gosh, no, this is actually chaotic. What does this have to do with sister? And what is...
Tia was deciding between whether to go to college or whether to take a job at the WNBA, and there was this big basketball player that was on the show.
Yeah, so that's my answer as well.
This is Rebound Revolution, a not-so-basketball podcast bringing you the revolutionary on and off the court happening in the WNBA. From queer baddies to history to ones to watch, join me, Money, as we get into it all. This week, I'm joined by CBC sports journalist and independent podcaster Shireen Ahmed. We talk about turning a moment of bigotry into a dope-ass Instagram handle, hijabi ballers, and the significance of her role of reporting women's sports for Canada.
CBC, which is the main public broadcaster, is getting their news from a brown hijabi woman. I'm like, they ain't ready, but they really ain't ready. And my editor's like, that's not our problem. That's their problem. And they better get ready.
Canada proved that they are more than ready for WNBA basketball when the Lynx Sky Game sold out in Toronto in one day. This game gave Lynx player Bridget Carleton a history-making moment, becoming the first Canadian to play a WNBA game in Canada. Shout out to Ontario. But Canadians have had a lot to say about women's basketball for a minute. Being the nerd I am, I had to look it up, and turns out Kelly Boucher became the first Canadian to play in the W when she joined the Charlotte Sting in 1998, just 2 seasons into the WNBA existing at all. In the today of things, Canadians continue to be fan faves in the W. I mean, what WNBA fan hasn't had a crush on Kia Nurse? Am I right? This episode, we're going to learn a little about how folks in Canada have been amplifying women's basketball, even outside of playing the game. From podcasting to writing to teaching, Canadians have been creating a culture of feminism and sports with basketball right at the center of the conversation. Hey, Shireen.
Hey, Money.
Thank you so much for being here with me today on Rebound Revolution.
Thanks for having me.
So, do you have a one to watch, like a favorite player or a favorite team in the W?
Okay, well, I'm not going to lie. I'm literally wearing my New York Liberty jersey right now. And the reason that came out is I am from Canada and as such have a big, I love Kia Nurse. She started off there. She was drafted from UConn. Of course, she's not there now. She's in Seattle. But I still, this year's a big year for Liberty. So I think I might keep this jersey around, keep my hoodie around. I mean, I think as a sentimental fave, one of my favorite players, though, who I do love, is Azurá Stevens.
I love Azurá.
Yeah, love her. I knew her from UConn, same time that I met Kia and those folks. But I really, really loved that group of young women. Like Katie Lou Samuelson was there as well. But Azurá has to be probably the nicest athlete I've ever met in my life. She is sweet, kind.
I was going to ask if she was nice because she will be just shooting the lights out in somebody's face with a smile.
Yeah, she rebounds with nobody's business. But then, when I got to know her a bit more, we talked about her family's food truck. And we talked about the food that her family makes. And like when you know that part of it, it makes sense. She's actually one of my favorites because she's someone, if you're like, hey, would you like to come over dinner? She'd be like, yes, what can I bring? Like she's that person that she's just lovely. And, you know, she's also one of those people, she's risen in stardom. But like if I'll post a picture of my cat, she's like, oh, that's so cute, you know, kind of thing. Like she's still, because I really don't have a lot of like famous athletes in my DMs or anything. And I know that you asked for one, but I don't take direction really well. Another one of my favorite athletes has got to be Sarah Nurse. I am obsessed with women's hockey, and Sarah Nurse is also like that. She's adorable. She has an Instagram account with her and her dog, Romeo. And she's not only the first Black woman to win a gold in ice hockey, she's so lovely.
Is it a coincidence? Or is she related to Kia?
Oh, yeah. They're cousins. They're first cousins.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So very athletic genes over there with the Nurses.
Totally. And Kia's brother, Darnell, plays for the Edmonton Oilers. He's in the NHL. They're an incredibly athletic family, but just genuinely lovely humans.
So this might be obvious then, but is Kia your favorite Canadian in the WNBA?
Yes. No. Letitia Amahera is my favorite. I'm going to go like Letitia.
Okay.
Like, I love Letitia. Okay, sentimental reasons, yes. But I love them. There's only 4. There's not a whole lot. We'll go with Kia because Kia's the OG. But I love Letitia. She's also a fantastic person and player.
It feels like you have a University of Connecticut bias too. Like you root for UConn.
I am 100% biased towards UConn for the women, 100%.
For the Huskies.
I think that was because of Kia as well. But I mean, come on, like there's a bit of a legendary history there. You know, Rebecca Lobo, there is, you know, like there's Sue Bird. Like, do you know what I'm saying? The list goes on and on and on. But I went down there because they invited me to go talk to their athletes, and the women's basketball team all showed up to listen to my talk on, you know, justice, equity, inclusion in sport. And they were all there. And like, I still have that selfie because I had no chill and I was taking selfies like constantly. And yeah, so I knew of Kia, but like, I really got to know her better on that trip and we kept in touch. But yeah, UConn, go Huskies, 100%. I love them. I think that people were like, oh, it's not fair when one team dominates, but we're not in that place anymore. We're not in a place where UConn does dominate. We're in a place where they're highly competitive. And what ends up happening is there is a blueprint created on how to do that. And Coach Dawn Staley has done it. She's created legends. Yeah. So like, I think that's really important. You know, South Carolina is doing it. LSU is doing it, like doing all these things. And, you know, I come from a particular set of politics, and, you know, LSU's coach doesn't really, you know, she doesn't align. And no amount of feathers and glitter is going to distract me from that. But at the same time,
we see you, Kim.
Yeah, we see you, Kim. But at the same time, I'm rooting for those players. I want those players to succeed. And of my years of work in this, there is a way to support those players, those Black women, those queer women that are in those spaces.
100%.
But I think of all these women and those relationships that have been created. And I don't know, it's really nice to have been and experienced that at some point.
Yeah. I think folks who listen to this podcast know that I have something about rooting for the underdogs. So I have not historically been a fan of UConn because they dominated for so long. And I am still holding a grudge that, so I went to Syracuse, root for Syracuse women's basketball all the time, go Orange.
Yes.
And the year that we could have won a championship, the one year that we maybe could have done it with Brittany Sykes.
Oh, yeah.
Here comes Breanna Stewart, who's from Syracuse, to just shut our dreams down.
I feel that on the underdog thing.
Yeah.
But I'm happy with women's ball to jump on any bandwagon available. So I'm I'm so excited about women's basketball. Like for a while, I was like, do I love Notre Dame? Do I? You know?
Yeah.
But I was like, no, like I'm not like a diehard fan that I only want them to win. I'm happy. I'm that person that feels like we all win kind of thing. Not that I want everyone to go to the White House. Only the winners should go to the White House. But You know I had to say that, Minnie.
That was so much shade. If you know, you know.
Man.
But yeah, Dr. Biden, what is you thinking? Only the winners go. That was such a move to like white fragility and like soothing.
It's, you know what that is? It's like Dr. Biden doing girl power. We don't want that here. That's not our brand. That's not for us. That is a particular brand of white feminism that I have absolutely no interest in. And, you know, with respect, the opponents were like, yeah, no, that's not for us. Yeah. But I mean, Angel can talk all day if she wants. I'm going to hear it. Like, I'm happy. Yeah. I think it's also Dr. Biden doesn't exactly know the space very well. And then
read the room. Read the room. I think her inviting the runner-ups to the White House also like takes away from these women are competitors too. Like these folks battle it out to be the champion, right? So it like diminishes the work that they put into that you think that their feelings are hurt. I think it just takes away from this is a sport, you know, like, and they train, they work, they endure to play at a certain level. But okay, I feel like this leads me into so many questions I have for you, but I'm thinking about you being like a senior contributor for CBC Sports in Canada, but also you mentioned Burn It All Down podcast, and you said, I have a particular politic. So can you tell us a little bit about your particular politic and how Burn It All Down started?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite stories. Burn It All Down is most definitely my personal professional pride, to be honest. Mm-hmm. It emerged from Twitter DMs, and now Twitter is basically like in this hotbed of horribleness. But back in the day, it was used very, effectively as a journalistic tool, and people would connect. We kind of started off in Twitter DMs, and I created a group of people, including a baseball writer named Stacey May Fowles, who's a friend of mine in Toronto, Jessica Luther, Lindsay Gibbs, who was at Think Progress, Brenda Elsey, who's a dear friend, and a woman named Julie DeCaro, who's, left the show after 6 months. But we started that space, and, I was the only racialized woman in that group, but just to support each other through being women in the sports writing space, because it's hard. You deal with abuse, you deal with layers of it. I deal with, xenophobic, Islamophobic remarks and all those things, and racism. And then you couple that with misogyny. So we just sort of helped each other. And then one day Julie's like, let's have a podcast. And I'm like, what the fuck's a podcast? I didn't even know what a podcast was. And this is 6 years ago. And we started and we just kept going. And then that October, after Julie left, we asked Dr. Mira Rose-Davis, and then Mira came on, and it changed everything. And I've learned a lot from her. I've learned a lot from all of them. Like they're like family. And we're on hiatus right now. This was also a side hustle, right? So Burn It All Down was 2,000 hours of labor that was not remunerated. And when you're in a podcast space in sports, it's like, you see all these mediocre and subpar men getting millions of dollars or thousands of dollars for the work they do. And we were having very tangible, very intelligent conversations. And when Amira and I would be scheduled to do the show, just the two of us, we would hashtag it bitches be laboring. So it started off that way. We've done a lot of really cool stuff that I'm super proud of. We were vanguards in the space. And that's a word Jessica used, and I really liked it. I don't like to use the word pioneers because I think it's, colonial language, but really creating spaces and encouraging. Because of us, I know at least 10 other podcasts that started after us because we had, this journalist, but also academics. We knew that contextually our information was well rooted, but then also the way to present that to the public was really solid. And that is a combination that I really value still in my own personal practice. And the best thing that's ever happened to me in my journalistic career is to be able to align with academics, and we feed off of each other's work. So I'm very grateful. I could talk about this all day, Money. You better get me to stop.
I have follow-up questions because I could talk about it all day too. I think one thing I love is like, I don't even know what I would call it, but just like curbside feminism is just like the feminism of the streets, right? It's like, this is the anti-queer phobia, anti-racist, anti-patriarchal politic that we live every day just because of who we are. And I just love it when, like, you know, the theory and the like academic parts of feminism become so accessible like that. And Burn It All Down is definitely that. I think your Twitter presence is definitely that. So people might kind of like look kind of side eye at feminism and sports being in like the same sentence. So can you talk a little bit more about how your politics show up in your career as like a sports journalist?
Yeah, I think that's really important. My identity is not divorced from my work. So I do go with an anti-oppression lens. I think that one of the things in journalism is that this idea of being objective is gatekeeping by those with power and those with control.
Oh my gosh. I feel like you just blew my mind. Like, objectivity is a gatekeeping tool.
Yeah, totally. It absolutely is. And it's the way for people to control messages through different mediums. And
what stories get told.
Yeah, exactly. Who? Exactly. And Jessica said a long time ago, who tells the story is as important as the story. And for me, that has been instructive for me and how I move forward as a journalist. And Black colleagues of mine and, you know, racialized colleagues of mine, Indigenous colleagues of mine were like, well, can you be objective? How the fuck are you supposed to be objective about somebody being murdered? Like, give me a break. And you know what? I actually will flip that and say, I have the tools to see through a lens that you simply don't have. And I reject that. And one of my mentors, his name is Desmond Cole. He's a thinker. He's a journalist. He's a writer from Canada. He wrote a beautiful book called The Skin We're In. And I messaged him one day and I said, I'm really struggling with this. What do you think? And he said, give me a journalist that isn't biased. I prefer to declare my biases and then be honest about them as opposed to pretend and have my work touched by that and be honest. And the transparency here is important. And I've been so appreciative that he said that and I've followed through. And now when I teach, that's exactly what I say. I'm unapologetic. I believe in harm reduction. I've learned a lot about harm reduction from Jessica, who's reported on sexualized violence in sport, and from Katie Strang at The Athletic, like people who do it right. And I think that's one of the ethical obligations. And I'm really lucky that I've had the opportunity to learn from so many people. You know, I'm probably a thorn in the side of the old industry. I just don't give a shit. I'm here. I don't owe you anything. And Ari Chambers said on Twitter, and she was talking about Angel Reese, actually, and she was saying that her obligation as a human is to protect her community first. And that's something that has stayed with me since. I'm not a beat reporter. My role as a contributor at the CBC is I'm a columnist, which is literally my dream job, and to write scripts for things and to do digital media. But my obligation is to also be cognizant of the families and the communities and the people and individuals from the marginalized communities that I speak to. And I'm not somebody who just reports on matches and statistics. I'm somebody who looks at overall context. And so, like the gatekeeping thing, the objectivity thing, my job is to be fair and accurate. And I'm both those things.
And that's it, folks. Yes. Yes. Everything you said. It's like objectivity just forces us to kind of chop parts of our identity off and leave it outside the door. I refuse to do that. You refuse to do that. Like, what's the point of continuing to do that when we've seen the violence that has done to folks' stories being told, folks' stories being erased? You know, it's like, I'm not leaving no part out. And I feel like this really connects with your work with hijabi ballers too.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the things that was so important about Burn It All Down as well. In addition to hijabi ballers, that we created spaces that no one else was giving us. I'm on the advisory board of Hijabi Ballers, which is an organization in Toronto that encourages and creates opportunity for Muslim women who have very low athletic participation rates to be involved in various levels of sport. And that is really important to me. And the other thing is providing accommodations, whether they want to be in a women's only space. They don't want to have people who identify as men because of their choice. And I think that's the thing. It's choice. I've worked a lot in my career on exclusion of women from sports because of hijab, which is definitely, you know, they are policies that are marinated in, you know, anti-Blackness. I mean, the amount of misogynoir that Muslim Black athletes feel is astounding. And the same thing with, the xenophobia, anti-Muslim rhetoric, all around lack of accommodation. And those policies are made by men or white women. And that is violence. It is somebody policing your body. And I just don't have time for it. I'm like, this is absolute bullshit. And the fact that Canada is getting its news, and CBC, which is the main public broadcaster, is getting their news from a brown hijabi woman. I'm like, they ain't ready, but they're really ain't ready. And my editor's like, that's not our problem. That's their problem. And they better get ready. And when you go into a room and you scan really quickly to find all the melanated folk?
Yes.
It's second nature to me. It really is. I just still do. I'm grateful to have the opportunities that I do, but I'm also really cognizant. My friend Marcia Gay Knight, who I love dearly, she said that at the ESPNW summit that was held in Canada. She said, pay attention to who's not in the room. And if I can shout out Black in Sport Business, she runs that organization. And she's one of the smartest women I've ever met in my life. And so undervalued in this industry for what she can bring. So she says, look around and see who's not here. I see that all the time. Yeah. So as I do my work, that's kind of a weight that we carry with us.
Yeah, it is. I even think about I'm interviewing you today, but the way you are opening and creating space for folks whose work informs yours or whose work maybe doesn't get celebrated as much as it should because of how insurgent and important it is.
I think there's something else that we feel in marginalized communities where there's only room for one. And I did a Twitter thread a while ago. I was presenting at a school in Islamic Heritage Month. And I had a student who said to me, what one thing sort of threw you off in your career that you were not prepared for? I think about that question a lot. And my answer was white feminism. And the way that has sabotaged other people's careers, that has excluded, it is violence, it is a form of violence. But when I say that in a room with 90% of white women who are like, yay Spice Girls, it gets very, very uncomfortable. But, I say it anyway. And there's this book called White Women, Everything You Already Know About Your Own Racism and How to Do Better by Regina Jackson and Sarah Rao. I suggest that to everyone I know. And then before that, the book that I swore by was White Tears, Brown Scars by Ruby Hamad. I think particular to the sport media space, there's an agency that white women will have that the racialized folks won't. And I think it's just really important to recognize those differences. Yeah.
When I think about white feminism and why it fails everybody is whether you're white or not, right? Like white feminism is the practice of only looking at single axis oppression, right? And so I think definitely white women do that. But I also think when you don't have to be a white woman to be a white feminist. I think when women get in these spaces and feel that oppressive, there can only be one of you, regardless of racialized identity, we start to push each other out of those spaces when actually you are such a blueprint and an example of no, actually we can open and create more space. So yeah, I'm just having these feminism revelations talking to you. But I think part of that feminist revelation is space is so important. So to go all the way back to when we were talking about hijabi ballers, I think so much about hair and the politics around it. Whether we have it out, think about everything from Serena Williams and Venus Williams beads to Aaliyah Boston's colorful braids to covering our hair, right? And what pushback and limitations that sets. That is a contextual experience that Black and brown women experience constantly, all the time, But I think about these rules that sports programs had around your hair has to be in a ponytail for a game. Who do you think is showing up in that space for that to be a rule around hair, But
also, more importantly about that ponytail, who decides that? So a lot of my work in uniform accommodation or in inclusion was finding out who made those rules. And the answers were very clear. It was white men or men with power. And those who want to be white adjacent or white women were up in those echelons. And I mean, I'm not saying there's not racialized women or Black women or brown women in sports places. We know that, I mean, the new head of Canada Soccer, Charmaine Crooks, is a Black woman. We know that Kim Davis is at the NHL. We know that Fatima Samora is the Secretary General of FIFA. But we also know the history of Black women being used as shields by other people to say that, you know, we're not racist. Look, we have a Black friend. We have a Black exec. So, like, I take all of that into consideration. And as far as Muslim women goes, our bodies have been so policed. In France, I work on stories all the time where Muslim women are not allowed to play sports at all. And the majority of Afro-Arabs in France are from West or Northern Africa, or just from, you know, different Arab communities. So there's many layers, as I said, of anti-Blackness, of xenophobia, Islamophobia, mixed with that misogyny. And it's really hard to exist and to love what you love. Listen, I am somebody, if jewelry is a problem and you can get hurt, if you can hurt yourself, then take out your nose ring or take off your earrings or whatever. But, like, please don't with me. Well, the hijab will hurt your opponent. I spent years looking for that information. It doesn't exist. These are all forms of control, all of them. And, you know, I remember during the Olympics in Tokyo, this was a thesis I had sort of been working on a long time. And do you remember the Norwegian beach netball team or the handball team? Pink came out, the entertainer, and was like, she paid all their fines because they wanted to wear boy shorts instead of wearing like thongs. And they were like, we don't want to wear bikini bottoms. We want to wear shorts. It's easier for to compete. But their federation said, no, you have to wear like thongs or like bikini bottoms. And so Pink was like, that's terrible. They should wear whatever they want. And I'm like, the whole world was rallying around these Norwegian women. And I'm like, what the fuck? That's what I've been screaming.
I never heard about this. What?
Yeah. So, well, I'm not glad you hadn't heard, but basically it was like a group of women who wanted to decide what they wanted to wear. And the way that the white world rallied around them to say, this is unfair, women should have a choice. I'm like, Muslim women have been saying that forever. When you don't let us wear hijab, when you exclude us from everything. I remember writing a story a long time ago now. It was like 2018 almost. And it was about Andrew Johnson, who was a wrestler from New Jersey who had to have his dreads cut.
His locks cut.
His locks were cut.
That.
And I remember talking to Amira about it and feeling physically ill. And it's not the first time it's happened.
Yes.
And like the violence with that and how it was a lot to deal with. And, you know, I feel like that in Indigenous cultures where their braids are sacred, you know, like how can you do that in Sikh cultures where they're encouraged to grow their hair long? It's so awful. And it's completely centered around those traditional white Eurocentric practices.
It is.
That's why we got to make all the noise, money.
Yes, yeah. I mean, and I also think about like Brittany Griner and like the first images of her coming back without her locks. I just like my stomach immediately sank. And when I saw her and the relief I felt when, you know, we found out that she cut her own locks. But like, there's just so much wrapped up in getting to the point as a Black person of loving your hair enough to wear it natural in any style, much less locks that, you know, are such a process that to just have them cut,
We should have a trigger warning at the beginning of the episode because, you know, like you said, you feel, I felt physically ill when I saw the videos of what was happening. And I was so angry because it is the injustice. And I think that that's the other thing is reframing within sport what injustice is, what inclusion does to people, the traumas they experience, intergenerational trauma of that, you know, like all of those things. And I think about that. My husband doesn't have locks, so he doesn't have hair. He shaves his head, but he puts his pick in his beard and will walk around. And I think he's adorable. And then his sister will call me and be like, y'all have no shame. Why is he walking around like that? And just because, like, you know, you talk about self-love. And I'm in my mid-40s, and so is he. And we're still learning at this age to love ourselves. I'm still learning as I approach menopause. What does that look like on my body? And how does that affect me? So it's not like we get to one place. It ebbs and flows. And when you have all of society, I mean, when I saw Brittany Griner come off that plane, I think I burst into tears. You know, because honestly, Money, I was praying that she would be okay because the situation just didn't look great.
Yeah.
And the way that it was being reported on. So, I'm grateful to Brittany and her big smile, and BG's back now, right? So like all's well. BG's back.
Yep.
We heard you loud and clear. You love the WNBA and want more analysis and insight on your favorite players.
Welcome to Queens of the Court, an Odyssey original podcast. I'm your girl, Cheryl Swoops.
And I'm Jordan Robinson. All season long, we'll be bringing you the post-game analysis that you crave and sitting down for interviews with athletes across the W.
You can listen to Queens of the Court on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, so kind of in the energy of BG being back, to bring it kind of full circle, I feel like this is a historic season for the WNBA.
Yeah.
I saw the billboards that said basketball is back, which is a statement, with a black lesbian on it, Brittany Griner, but basketball is back. But also there was the first WNBA game in Canada. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on this. I feel like this is really important, but how important was this WNBA game in Toronto?
I think it was huge. It was huge for many reasons. One, because we are ready. We've been ready for a team, and not just Kia Nurse. You and I talked about Kia in the beginning of it, who was such a great role model. Bridget Carlton is here. Kim Gaucher previously played. We've got solid basketball here, and people think of our ice hockey all the time, and which is absolutely true. But basketball is here, and it has such a culture that lives and breathes in Toronto. Another woman I want to shout out is a woman named Fitria Mohammed, and she started a Muslim Women's Summer Basketball League. Now she's out modeling for Canada Goose and stuff, and she was there, and there are so many spaces in which basketball has clung. There's a strong Black community, Hoop Queens is a league here that's local. There was Tasia McKenna, who is the commissioner of the Maritime Women's Basketball League out east on the Atlantic coast. And you wouldn't think of it, but it lives and just thrives here. The lower bowl tickets sold out in less than 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And, Commissioner Engelbert was talking about it, and Portland was ranked high as well to consider for an expansion team. But, she's about the money. Mm-hmm. She's about the business case. And I go to Raptors games when I can. My husband is the in-house host, so I love going to those games. I love the energy. But this was different. This was families with children. I saw dads with their sons, moms with their daughters, any possible combination, people with their partners' families, just felt like a festival.
Yes.
And I sat in media row, and it was all women in my row, which has never happened before in the Scotiabank Arena. And to be there and to ask the questions and to have the focus, it was also not just a celebration of those people who have already done that work and created pathways for us. It's to say we're here, we're ready, we've been ready, but this can happen, and there is a market for it.
What about Toronto specifically, or maybe just Canada in general, do you think makes it ready for a women's basketball team? What contributes to that? We've been ready.
Well, I'm not going to lie and say that the Toronto Raptors don't have a lot to do with it. And John Wiggins is the vice president of inclusion and corporate culture and has really hired women. The first all-women broadcast for the NBA was 2 years ago in Toronto. I think they played Denver. Wow. It was done here. And that's really important to remember, that we have the talent. We have the people ready to do it in these spaces. It's a matter of assembling them and recognizing those. There's a lot of Black women who are leaders in the space and for their G League team. And it's not a surprise to anyone that we're ready who lives here. Toronto is absolutely ready. And I think that's a nod to the people doing the space. The excitement's here. And people might not want only ice hockey. That culture is too insular. I do a lot of work in hockey, and it is rough. And people love basketball. It is probably has the most cultural currency in terms of a sport in the city. You go anywhere, every community, church league, recreational league, Hijabi Ballers have a league, the Muslim Women's Summer Basketball League have a league. Everybody got a league. And that's what the currency is. And it's time to cash in with that currency.
Yes. So like the community leagues, the rec leagues, that's built this culture and excitement around basketball there.
Absolutely. And I think the beautiful thing with the W is you can see yourself reflected there. No matter who you are represented and reflected.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of easy to talk about like the impact a team has on a city, but I'm thinking about the impact the city has on the league, right? So like, what do you think it would mean for the league to have a W team in Toronto specifically, but like in Canada, just generally?
I think that Toronto is the perfect place. People come here, like Serge Ibaka came to the game with his daughter, got a standing ovation. People like that come here and love it. The culture, the vibe of the city, the food. I'm telling you, our food is untouched. You can get banh mi, you can get authentic Uyghur cuisine, and it's halal. Like you can get anything in the city in different places.
Because everybody is there.
Like, everybody is here. The winters can be tough, but so is Chicago, and they're fine. Like, do you know what I'm saying?
So is New York.
So is
Minnesota.
Oh my gosh, Minnesota. So like, Toronto is a world-class city, and you were talking about underdogs, Money, that you love underdogs. Toronto is an underdog city. People don't give it its credit. And you know what? We'll take that, because we got an NBA ring. We're going to get our team in the W. I would love for that to happen because the caliber of basketball of the W, the product sells itself. We want to invest in that. We're ready to invest in women. We're ready to invest in women's sports. People are basically like, take my money. One of the greatest things about the WNBA game that was played here was that they didn't price it at like NBA prices. They did pricing that was possible, that people who are fans could come. I ran into fans outside the game and they were all able to go. And they were like, we can't afford any other thing anymore, but this was for us. And whether you were in the 300s or the lower bowl, it was just wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Like the accessibility to the game. People who maybe have never been to that venue for a sporting event before can come now. Okay, Shireen, we've mentioned your Twitter a few times. Where can folks find you?
So it's @_Shireen Ahmed _. I'm on the Instagram, the gram, whatever the kids call it. It's @FootyBedsheets. And people ask, why do I say that? The reason I say footy bed sheets is when I started to play soccer again after a while, I went and I was wearing a hijab and one of the opponents says to me, are those bed sheets? What's on your head? Right. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, you just gave me my brand. So it's footy for soccer, football, bed sheets.
All right. Thank you so much, Shireen. It's truly been amazing talking to you today. There are a lot of dope players in the W, but not everyone gets their flowers. And I want to make sure they do. So I'm going to shout out a player who everyone should know in a little segment called Money's MVP. My MVP this week is the Canadian cutie herself, Kia Nurse. Now, Kia comes from a family of athletes, and in just 5 short years, she's made a name for herself and Canada in the WNBA. She currently plays for the Seattle Storm and has some big shoes to fill with Sue Bird retiring. But if anybody can do it, Kia can. Here are 3 reasons why Kia is my MVP. Reason number 1. She's a graduate of the University of Connecticut, UConn, the Huskies, so you know that means she's won some college championships. 2, to be exact. She was also the only UConn player to start in every game during the 2015 championship season. Reason number 2. In her sophomore year in the W, she was voted as a WNBA All-Star starter, making her just the 3rd Canadian to ever play in a WNBA All-Star game. Come on, we love history makers. And last but not least, whether playing on the Phoenix Mercury, the New York Liberty, or her current team, the Seattle Storm, Kia puts on for her hometown of Hamilton, Ontario. She played for the Canadian Olympic team twice and prides herself on being a possibility model for other Canadian hoopers, especially curly-head girls like her. So shout out to Kia. Want to sound like you in the know when it comes to the W? I got you. This is Fundamentals, where I'll give you a rundown of something to make you look like you're the expert in the room. This week's Fundamentals is the paint. The paint is such ubiquitous basketball slang that it even crept into non-sports language. For example, one of my favorite songs to get moving in college was Hard in the Paint by Waka Flocka Flame. So in Black English, going hard in the paint just means not holding back and giving something your all. But in basketball, the paint is an actual place, also referred to as the key or the lane. The paint is the rectangular area right under the basket from the baseline to the free throw line. Now, this area is usually a different color than the rest of the court, and it's often painted to match the colors of the team, hence the nickname, the paint. So going hard in the paint in basketball means giving it your all under the basket. Scoring anywhere in the paint is worth 2 points. A player I love to watch in the paint is Arike Ogunbowale of the Dallas Wings. In comparison to other players, she's not the tallest, but she is so creative in getting to the basket to score. Now, someone I definitely don't want to see in the paint if I'm trying to score is Hall of Famer Lisa Leslie, who retired in 2009 and is still second in the league for block shots. Basically, you're not scoring when Lisa is in the paint. So the next time you see someone blocking a shot or making it to the basket against all odds, you can say they went hard in the paint. Rebound Revolution is an Edit Audio original podcast created in collaboration with The Cube. I'm your host, Money Mahechern, and this episode was produced by Melissa Houghton, Mick Finnegan, and me. It was edited, mixed, and mastered by Mick Finnegan. Our supervising producer is Anna Deshawn. Our executive producer is Steph Colburn. Thank you to Kathleen Speckert and the whole Edit Audio team.